Okay, so hopefully you've had time to complete the which trig ratio, see if we can get focus there, worksheet. So what I'm going to do now is show you the answers. So what you need to do is pause the video so that you can see the answers to the front page, and then pause it again so you can see the answers to the back page, and then I will walk you through using the calculator. Here are numbers 1 through 4, so if you need to pause the video to see those. Here are the answers to 5 through 8, so if you need to pause the video to see those. On the back, here are your answers, to 9 through 12. So again, if you need to pause the video. And here is 13 through 16. And then there are the last two, 17 and 18. So now what we're going to do is talk about how to use the calculator to actually get the answer to the question. So hopefully by now you feel a little more comfortable with how to set up the trig functions. So now we're actually going to look at getting the answer. So I'm just going to say trig continued and using the calculator. Now, you might need to verify when you're using a calculator. Some of them are done differently. The calculator on your cell phone is done differently than the handheld calculators that we have in the classroom. So you do just need to pay attention, test a couple of them out, and then you can make sure that you're entering the question correctly. The calculators that we are going to use, just right here, the scientific ones, those are even done differently than maybe the graphing calculators are done. So just to keep in mind that calculators might do these problems differently, the order that you press the buttons in. Okay, so if you know the angle, all right, so this is if you know the angle. So you know that the angle is 37 degrees, or you know that the angle is 57 degrees. Then what you do is you are going to use the sine of the angle button, or you would use the cosine of the angle, or you would use the tangent of the angle. So that's what you do if you know the angle. All right, so for example, this is just the, oops, let's turn the light off there. Ooh, it might be hard to see, but so here is just our standard calculator that we have in the classroom. So your sine, cosine, and tangent buttons are right here. So here's sine, here's cosine, here's tangent. So if you know the angle, so let's just say the sine of 31 degrees, you just type in the sine. Let's see if we can get it focused a little bit better. No, maybe not. The sine of 31 degrees, and then you hit enter. Now, obviously, the calculator is going to give you your answer in decimal form, which is completely fine when we do sine and cosine functions. All right, so this is basically saying that the fraction for the sine of 31 is somewhere around 1/2. So if you think about the sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, the opposite side is 1, the hypotenuse is 2, because 0.5 is very close to 1/2. All right, you clear that. If you want the cosine, then you type cosine and then your angle. So we could say cosine of 31 degrees. You hit enter, and it gives you, again, the decimal form of the relationship between the adjacent and hypotenuse. So all of the fractions that we are going to be using are going to be changed into decimals and vice versa. So if you know the angle measurement, it's very simple. If you want the tangent of 31 degrees, you just type the tangent, 31, hit enter, And again, you're going to get the decimal form for the opposite over adjacent. So doing that one is pretty easy. All right, so now what we're going to do is look at what happens if you don't know the angle. And that's what you're trying to figure out. So if you do not know the angle. So the deal here is if you do not know the angle, then what you're doing is you're kind of going backwards. So what you're going to do is enter the fraction, but you want to go backwards to figure out the angle. So on every calculator, we know that there is an opposite button for every button. So the sine, and there's the inverse sine. Here's the cosine, there's the inverse cosine. Here's the tangent, there's the inverse tangent. So this one works just like the x squared and the square root button. They kind of undo each other. All right, so if we are going backwards, then we're going to use the inverse buttons, which means that we have to press the second button before we press sine and so forth. So what we're going to do is use the inverse sine and the inverse cosine and the inverse of tangent. And then what's going to happen is in the parentheses, we are going to put our fraction, which is the opposite over hypotenuse. Or here, we would put in the fraction for the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And then here, we would type in the fraction for the opposite over adjacent. All right, so let's just say that we were going to do, let's say that we come up with the problem that the sine of angle A is 3/5. All right, so what this means is that we know that this right here is the opposite side, and we know this right here is the hypotenuse side, and what we are trying to find right here is the measure for angle A. So that's what we're trying to figure out. So in this case, we do not know the angle. We know the two sides. So the way this is going to get typed into the calculator is that we are going to do the inverse sine of 3/5. All right, so this is going to be typed in like that. So if you look at the calculator, what we're going to do is press second sine to get the inverse sine. And then the way we make a fraction is just dividing. So I'm going to type in 3 divided by 5. And that is what it's going to give me. It's going to give me the fraction looking form on there. And sorry that we can't get this focused any better. So again, this time I don't know what the angle is, so I'm using the inverse sine because I'm going backwards. And then when we press enter, this tells me that the angle is almost 37 degrees. So 36.86, blah, 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 whatever. All right, so here are our rounding rules, okay? So when we do these problems, for your answers, if you are finding the side of a triangle, I want you to round to the nearest tenth. If you are finding the answer to an angle, we're going to go to the nearest whole angle, whole degree. All right, so that's how we're going to work our answers. So the sides of our triangles will go to the nearest tenth, so 1 decimal place, but for the angles, we're going to go to the closest whole degree. Okay, so let's see about working some of these out. So if we go back to your trig ratio page, so I'm going to flip over here. So the answer to number 1 on our which trig ratio, we got that the tangent of 25 degrees is x over 12. All right, so we're trying to solve for x. So in order to solve for x, I need to get x by itself. So what you need to say is, what do I need to do to get rid of this 12? How do I get x by itself? And hopefully you are saying to yourself, multiply both sides by 12, because that will cancel that out. So that means that the value of x is going to be 12 times the tangent of 25 degrees. Okay, so I'm just solving the equation. All right, so then we're going to grab our handy-dandy calculator here. And if you don't feel comfortable putting this first, that's fine. You can do the tangent of 25 degrees and then multiply by 12. But you can just type it in as is. So 12 tangent 25, and it is 5.6. Now, the reason why I said 5.6 is because we're looking for a side measurement. Actually, this is the opposite. Since it's tangent, I know the opposite is about 5.6. So x equals 5.6. So on this triangle over here, this was number 1 that we were just doing, this side is 12, that's 25 degrees, and this side right here is 5.6. So now if I wanted to, I could finish solving the triangle by doing Pythagorean theorem to get this side, and then I could subtract from 180 or even just 90 to get that angle measurement right there. All right, let's try number 2. All right, number 2, if you learn this trick, this will make all of these problems a lot easier. So number 2, we came up with the cosine of 31 degrees is 12 over x. All right, now, we can go through this the long way, or kind of like our shortcut the other day with the special right triangles. You can just trust me on this, but if we want to solve for x, x is in the denominator. So what's really going to end up happening is we multiply both sides by x. So that cancels out. But then over here, now we need to get rid of the cosine of 31 degrees. So we have to divide by the cosine of 31 and divide by the cosine of 31 to get rid of that. So here's the deal. If you ever have x in the denominator, just switch the diagonals. So what we ended up with here by doing this solving is that x is 12 divided by the cosine of 31 degrees. So again, if you have x in the denominator, just switch those diagonals, and then this is what we need to do in our calculator. All right, so we're going to grab the calculator, clear our last problem, and now we're doing 12 divided by cosine of 31. And we hit enter. And again, this is a side, because I knew the angle, so I was missing the side. So I'm going to say it's 14. So this x is 14. X is 14. All right, next up, let's move down to number 5. So number 5, the problem that we got there to solve for number 5 is that the tangent of x is 3 over 2. And again, I reduced that, so that was a little bit better. All right, so on this problem, we do not know the angle. We know the sides. We don't know the angle. So what we need to do is the inverse tangent button. So if you grab your calculator, clear off the last one. So I don't know the angle, but I know the fraction. So second tangent, and then 3 divided by 2, close those parentheses. This is going to give me my angle measurement, and we said we were going to round angles to the nearest whole angle. So in this problem, the angle is 56 degrees. So x equals 56 degrees. So in this picture right here, What we just found out was that the measure of that angle is 56 degrees.